Everybody thought Brady Quinn was going in the top 5. He slipped and he went all the way to Cleveland. Cleveland hasn't worked out very well for a lot of quarterbacks.
The Cleveland Browns are where quarterbacks typically go to end their careers. The all-time leading touchdown passer for the Cleveland Browns last played in 1955. Their all-time leading passer last played in 1983. The team got suspended in 1995, got brought back in 1999, drafted a college prodigy everyone thought would be a future first ballot Hall of Famer, and he lasted just 5 seasons and threw more interceptions than touchdowns, but still holds the record for most games played by a Browns quarterback since 1999. At this point, you probably know the Cleveland Browns are a factory of sadness, and after finding their franchise quarterback, they turned around and ruined everything they built in one offseason. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop a like and subscribe, as we are on the grind to 1 million subscribers. And now that we get all that out of the way, work! We made $500 on Prize Picks this past Sunday, and fortunately, a lot of you guys tailed my picks on Instagram and Snapchat, and you guys let me know in my DMs. One of you even made $1,000 from my picks. Prize Picks is giving us another free square, meaning we only need to get 1 pick correct in order to 3x our money. All Anthony Edwards needs to do on opening night is score 1 point. Fortunately, we've been on a crazy streak, and if you haven't played Prize Picks, download the app or click in the link in the description down below and use my promo code Mikerophone to get $100 when you make an entry of $5 or more. Then follow me on Instagram at TheFlightMike or on Snapchat to get my picks for free. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? In 1994, things were exponentially better for the Cleveland Browns than they are right now. Under 4th-year head coach Bill Belichick, yes, that Bill Belichick, the Browns had won 11 games, the most they've ever had since 1986, and they had achieved their second best finish in the AFC Central Division in half a decade. They had even won a playoff game against the New England Patriots before losing to the Pittsburgh Steelers by 20 a week later. Their quarterback during this run was journeyman QB Vinny Testaverde, but back then he was a former #1 overall pick that was on his second stint with another team. Despite their playoff loss, things were looking up in Cleveland for the first time in a decade. They had a long-tenured head coach, they had just drafted Ohio State standout linebacker Craig Powell in the first round, and Vinny Testaverde had brought some stability to a Browns quarterback position that hadn't seen a successful starter since Brian Sippy in 1983, who happens to be the Browns' all-time leader in passing yardage. Considering all of this, there was no reason to believe that the Browns wouldn't be successful yet again in 1995, which is why it was surprising that the team went 5-11. And not only that, but it would get way worse because the Browns would lose their entire franchise. Yes, you heard that correctly. Cleveland would lose their team after owner Art Modell had secret negotiations with the state of Maryland in 1995, which resulted in Modell announcing mid-season that it would be the final football campaign in Cleveland, at least for now.
Just don't even know how to react.
Some knew exactly what they wanted to do. Seats that have been in place since 1931 were torn out and taken home for memento.
In Modell's agreement to move the Browns to Baltimore, he agreed to essentially begin a new franchise, forfeiting the history of the Browns and their name to a new franchise, while essentially creating a new team with a new history in Baltimore. The Cleveland Browns did not exist in 1996, 1997, and 1998, but in 1999, Al Lerner, a real estate mogul and CEO of the Maryland National Bank, bought the rights to the Cleveland Browns franchise and thus began a brand new era of Cleveland Browns football. But it wouldn't be even close to the previous era.
For the first pick in the 1999 draft, the Cleveland Browns selection is from the University of Kentucky, quarterback Tim Couch.
Tim Couch made NFL history when he was drafted #1 overall by the new Cleveland Browns. He did this after winning the SEC Player of the Year award and leading the NCAA in touchdown passes in back-to-back seasons with 73 combined touchdowns and finishing 4th in Heisman Trophy voting. This might seem like a good pick on paper, but when you consider the fact that they passed up on Donovan McNabb, who was selected a pick later by the Eagles, and Ricky Williams, the 1998 Heisman Trophy winner, winner and future 10,000-yard rusher, this pick may be one of the worst picks in NFL history, and considering the fact that we're talking about the Cleveland Browns, that's saying something. Tim Couch may have been the #1 overall pick by the new Browns, but he wasn't the first ever starting quarterback. That honor would go to BYU's only Heisman winner, Ty Detmer, who at this point in his career had played in Green Bay, San Francisco, Philadelphia, and now Cleveland. Detmer was awful in the Browns' first game in 4 years, completing under 50% of his passes for less than 60 yards. And after game 1, Tim Couch took over before relinquishing his starting spot in week 15 to Detmer after suffering his first of many injuries. Now in 2000, the Browns improved, going from winning 2 games in 1999 to an astounding 3 games in 2000. This year, Couch started the first 7 games of the season before fracturing a finger in his throwing hand, giving Doug Peterson, yes, that Doug Peterson, and Spurgeon Wynn some starts to end the season. For reference, we are only 2 seasons into the new era of the Cleveland Browns, and there's already been 4 starting quarterbacks. And it would get so much worse. From 2001 to 2003, the Browns did improve dramatically from the horrific 2 seasons they had prior. In 2001, Couch managed to start all 16 games, and even though he threw 17 touchdowns to 21 interceptions, the Browns still went 7-9. In 2002, they even made the playoffs before losing in the wildcard round 33-36 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But before you think it was Tim Couch who put up 33 points, he didn't. That was backup Kelly Holcomb, who took over from Tim Couch just a few weeks earlier after he broke his leg in a game against the Falcons. After this season, there were a few things clear to the Cleveland Browns. And no, one of them wasn't the fact that they probably needed to get an offensive line to protect Tim Couch, who had been absolutely devastated by injuries at this point of his career. It was to move on from Tim Couch completely because his backup led the Browns to a marginal amount of success. So the Browns would move on from Tim Couch entirely, and Couch would never play in an NFL game ever again. So after their first overall pick in 1999 was a colossal bust, the team refused to put any significant capital, whether it be draft capital or financial capital, into the quarterback position. Now, I don't understand what the strategy here was, but for 3 seasons, the team trotted out names like Jeff Garcia, Luke McCown, Trent Dilfer, Charlie Fry, Derek Anderson, and Ken Dorsey. Yes, that Ken Dorsey, all of whom were either late to mid-round draft picks or way past their prime quarterbacks, just trying to relive the glory days of their NFL career. Over this 3-year span, the Browns won 14-34, finished dead last in their division all 3 seasons, and over the course of those 3 seasons, all 6 quarterbacks combined for 51 touchdown passes and 63 interceptions. The Browns were, for all intent and purposes, in football purgatory, but things were all about to change in 2007, just not in the way some people in the organization thought it would.
With the 22nd pick in the NFL draft, the Cleveland Browns select Brady Quinn, quarterback, Notre Dame.
For the first time since Tim Couch 7 years prior, the Cleveland Browns had finally invested a first-round pick into the quarterback position with Brady Quinn. That season, with the help of their highly touted first-round pick, the Cleveland Browns would win 10 games, the most since they were brought back in 1999. And they would even finish second in their division, but there was just one problem. It wasn't Brady Quinn that was helping them do this. It was primarily because of their other first-round pick in the same draft.
Okay, with the 3rd pick in the 2007 NFL Draft, left tackle Joe Thomas, Wisconsin.
That's right, Joe Thomas, one of, if not the best left tackle to play the game of football. Instead of Quinn taking the reins year 1, the Browns stuck with Derek Anderson, who actually had one of the most prolific seasons in new Cleveland Browns history, throwing 29 touchdowns to 19 interceptions. And although 10-6 is typically a good enough record to make the playoffs, in 2007, the AFC was stacked with talent. And the Tennessee Titans, who also finished 10-6, made it in over the Browns as they had a better winning percentage against common opponents. In 2008, first-round pick Brady Quinn would finally get control of the offense, right? Well, no. Derek Anderson was still tasked with most of the starts that season, and even Ken Dorsey happened to get more playing time than the now 24-year-old Brady Quinn. Bruce Gradkowski even managed to slip a start into the season, which, mind you, was horrific. In 2009, most of the same old happened to the Browns. New head coach Eric Mangini, who replaced Romeo Crennel, was indecisive the entire season, switching from Anderson at QB QB, then back to Quinn, then back to Anderson, and before you know it, at the end of the year, they both had almost the exact same amount of starts, with Quinn narrowly edging Anderson out with his 9 starts to Anderson's 7. At the end of the season, it was clear that Mangini didn't like either quarterback, and he moved on from both. But in this particular instance, Eric Mangini may have accidentally made the greatest trade in Cleveland Browns history, trading Brady Quinn to the Broncos for Madden legend Peyton Hillis. From 2010 to 2013, the Browns continued to be in purgatory. They ended up moving on from Eric Mangini after 2010 before hiring offensive guru Pat Shurmur, who was then also canned after 2 seasons in favor of Rob Chudzinski. That's 3 head coaches in 4 years, and over that same course of time, they started quarterbacks like Colt McCoy, Jake Delhomme, Seneca Wallace, Thaddeus Lewis, Josh Johnson, Jason Campbell, Brian Hoyer, and even invested a first-round pick in a 29-year-old rookie by the name of Brandon Whedon, who lasted just 2 seasons with the team before being released at the age of 31. Over those 4 seasons, the Browns went 18-46, and all 7 of those quarterbacks accumulated 71 touchdown passes to 69 interceptions. Nice. Which I guess you could say is at least a positive touchdown to interception ratio, right? Going into the 2014 NFL season, after suffering through football purgatory for nearly a decade, the franchise had as bright of a future as it had ever had. But the same thing that made the future bright would also be the cause for its second-breaking downfall.
Maybe Manzel doesn't want to go to Cleveland. Everybody thought Brady Quinn was going in the top 5. He slipped and he went all the way to Cleveland. Cleveland hasn't worked out very well for a lot of quarterbacks. Manzel's crossing his fingers, hoping somebody else.
With the 22nd pick in the 2014 NFL Draft, Johnny Manzel, quarterback, Texas A&M.
Going into the 2014 season, the Cleveland Browns had finally done it. They drafted a quarterback that had no chance of becoming a draft bust. Just for reference, Johnny Manziel was by far and away the best player in college football for the 2 seasons he attended Texas A&M, and he won a Heisman Trophy as a freshman, put up even better numbers as a sophomore, and single-handedly brought Texas A&M back to relevance for the first time since the 1990s. He even had very respected NFL gurus and analysts saying things like this:
I am predicting Johnny Manziel will become even bigger in the city of Cleveland than his buddy and business partner LeBron James ever was in the city of Cleveland.
But it wasn't just the ever knowledgeable Skip Bayless that felt that Johnny Manziel was going to be a greater name than LeBron James ever was. Mel Kiper said the same thing.
Certainly Johnny Manziel in the discussion for the number 1 pick overall. But we do know the range of players are going to go in, and everybody told me Johnny Manziel is going somewhere in the top 5 overall.
It was truly difficult not to get sucked into Johnny Manziel mania back then. And honestly, given the history the Browns did, the fact that an individual that could have been selected number 1 overall that was practically hungover during the draft combine and tanked his stock all the way to the 22nd pick in the NFL draft, it was very challenging for the Browns not to take the bait. What if Johnny Manziel's the next coming of Aaron Rodgers, they told themselves? Well, with new head coach Mike Pettin and new franchise quarterback Johnny Manziel, the hope was that Cleveland would rise from the ashes and turn into an AFC powerhouse. But Johnny Football had other plans. In 2 seasons, Manziel started just 7 games before getting cut for off-the-field issues, including but not being limited to being in Las Vegas to party during a bye week and a domestic situation with his then girlfriend. With their perceived starting quarterback of the future being cut in just 7 games, the Browns were in quarterback turmoil. For what he was given, Mike Pettin made the most out of a horrific roster, going 7-9 in 2014, then 3-13 in 2015 before being fired after the season. In his place, the Browns hired Hugh Jackson, one of, if not the worst head coach in NFL history. In his first season, he had only 1 victory, and in his next, he had 0. The Browns had reached their lowest point, not only in team history, but in NFL history. Before the Browns had achieved 0-16 in 2017, the 2008 Lions had done it as well. But the difference was the Lions' 0-16 team was at least watchable. Dante Culpepper started some games, they had a young Calvin Johnson Jr., and whenever Dan Orlovsky stepped on the field, you knew something goofy was about to happen.
Here comes Jared Allen, and he's out of bounds. Poor guy, I don't even know if he realized it.
You just can't do that. You have to realize, and you can see him, he didn't even know he was out of bounds.
But when the Browns went 0-16, it was terrible game after game, and with a no-name quarterback throwing a football to a no-name receiver, repeat for 16 games, over these 4 years, the Browns started Connor Shaw, Johnny Manzel, Austin Davis, Josh McCown, Cody Kessler, a past his prime RG3, Charlie Whitehurst, Kevin Hogan, and Deshaun Kaiser. Over the course of those 4 seasons, the team went 11-53 with 9 starting QBs who threw 62 touchdowns to 70 interceptions. The team was not only in chaos, but it was an absolute ruin. They had churned through quarterbacks like butter, but the truth was, after all those years, those nearly 2 decades of trying to find the man to bring the Browns back to the promised land, the man they had been waiting for was about to fall right into their laps.
With the first pick in the 2018 NFL Draft, the Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
Quarterback, Oklahoma.
It is Baker Mayfield.
Almost 19 years to the day that the Browns drafted Tim Couch with the first overall pick in the 1999 NFL Draft, the Browns selected the walk-on from Oklahoma, Baker Mayfield, first overall in 2018. In terms of fit, it just made way too much sense. Baker Mayfield wasn't supposed to be a Heisman Trophy winner. He wasn't supposed to be the #1 overall pick. He scratched and clawed his way to get to that position when everybody else counted him out. He wasn't the most talented quarterback in the NFL Draft, but he was the guy to get the Browns back to relevance. And it was happily ever after, or at least it should have been. The plan for 2018 was to have Baker sit on the bench behind Tyrod Taylor until he was ready to start. However, after Tyrod Taylor went down with a concussion in late September, Baker took the starting job and never looked back. The rookie tossed 27 touchdowns to 14 interceptions and finished second in Rookie of the Year award voting, and in 1 year put up the best quarterback season since the Browns franchise was brought back in 1999. After Hugh Jackson was fired in week 8, interim head coach Greg Williams took over, and the Browns went 5-3 to end the season. And in 2019, the Browns asked Baker Mayfield for his opinion on who their next head coach should be. After all, this was probably their most promising quarterback in 2 decades. They didn't want to this up. But unfortunately, Baker Mayfield's a quarterback and he's not the general manager. So he chose Freddie Kitchens as the head coach of the team over Greg Williams because Greg Williams was primarily a controversial defensive coordinator that Baker Mayfield didn't really interact with very much. Not only this, but the Browns would double down on Baker Mayfield. They would trade for Odell Beckham Jr. They had a promising defense with the likes of Denzel Ward and Myles Garrett. Baker Mayfield was going to hand the football off to Nick Chubb. They had a decent offensive line. There's never been a time to be more excited as a Browns fan. And then they finished 6-10 and fired Kitchens after 1 season, which goes to show maybe it was a bad idea to promote a guy to a head coach just because your rookie QB said he wanted him. Instead of asking Baker, this time around, the Browns looked elsewhere and brought in Kevin Stefanski to be the head coach for the 2020 season. And not only would that change everything for the Browns, it created NFL history. In 2020, Baker put up career numbers, throwing for 26 touchdowns to just 8 interceptions, putting up the best quarterback season by a Browns QB since Brian Sippy in 1980. Not only that, he started 16 games in a row for the 2nd straight season, making him the first and only quarterback to start 32 straight games for the Browns since their reintroduction to the NFL in 1999. The Browns ended up winning 11 games that season, the most in franchise history since 1986. And against the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Browns did the unthinkable. They would win a playoff game. The defense looked dominant as ever. They crushed Ben Roethlisberger and the Pittsburgh Steelers' soul. Baker didn't even need to do that much, but he still threw 250 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game, en route to a 48-38 victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers, solidifying their franchise's first playoff win since Bill Belichick beat the New England Patriots all the way back in 1994. Sure, the team would go on to lose a nail-biter to the Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional round a week later, but it didn't matter. The Cleveland Browns won a playoff game and they hung in there. It looked like the Cleveland Browns were good enough to even beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Pigs could fly, Christmas was in July, the unthinkable had happened. And all of a sudden, it all fell apart. In 2021, after a historical season, the Cleveland Browns went 8-9, which was a decent record for sure by Brown standards, but not good enough to make the playoffs. Baker Mayfield was not good that season. He threw 17 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. Why was this the case? Well, Baker tore his labrum in his shoulder and opted to play through it, despite how much of a disadvantage this put him in. Despite all of this, the Browns made quite possibly their worst decision in franchise history. They traded traded Baker Mayfield to the Panthers for a late round pick. During that 4-season span, the Browns went 32-32, starting just Tyrod Taylor, Baker Mayfield, Case Keenum, and Nick Mullins. In that time frame, they accumulated 99 touchdown passes to 60 interceptions, by far and away the best over a time span so far, but they got greedy. In a twist of events, for whatever reason, after letting go of their best quarterback in franchise history over the last 35 years, the Cleveland Browns traded a king's ransom worth of draft picks to the Houston Texans for Deshaun Watson to give him the largest fully guaranteed contract in NFL history. A short time after this trade, shocking news came to light about Watson, where he was allegedly abusing and harassing over 30 women during his massage sessions, amongst other situations. Because of this, the Browns' new superstar quarterback had to wait to see the field as the NFL suspended him the first 11 games of the season. This meant that Jacoby Brissett would have to step up and start 11 games, becoming the 33rd man to start a game for the Cleveland Browns since 1999, after holding out the entire 2021 season for a new contract. Deshaun Watson was set to miss 28 games. That is a lot of rust for a guy who had just got paid the largest guaranteed contract in NFL history. After coming back for the last 6 games of the season in 2022, Deshaun Watson was mediocre, while Baker Mayfield was capturing lightning in a bottle with the Rams. In 2023, Baker Mayfield broke out with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers while being named to a Pro Bowl, while Deshaun Watson got injured just 6 weeks into the season and had to get shoulder surgery, meaning he'd miss the rest of the 2023 season. In the remaining 11 weeks, the Browns struggled to find a quarterback to lead them forward, bouncing from Dorian Thompson-Robinson to PJ Walker to Jeff Driscoll to finally Joe Flacco, who went on a revenge tour on the final 5 games of the season, throwing 13 touchdowns and over 1,600 yards to lead the Browns back to the playoffs. While they did lose to the Texans in the wildcard round, Flacco's late season resurgence proved that the Browns had a good roster, and despite the fact that Flacco went off in late 2023, the Browns opted to not re-sign him as a backup and decided to move forward with Deshaun Watson into the 2024 season. So far, Deshaun Watson has been terrible yet again this season, with a majority of fans calling for backup Jameis Winston to get playing time. There have been allegations of Deshaun Watson making burner accounts to support himself, rumors that a large part of the Amari Cooper trade was for him to get away from Deshaun Watson. And to make matters worse, there is yet another allegation made against Watson that the NFL is currently investigating. And right when you thought things couldn't get any worse, on October 20th, when the Cleveland Browns took on the Cincinnati Bengals, Deshaun Watson would go down with an Achilles tear. So now the Cleveland Browns not only gave up multiple first-round picks for Deshaun Watson to play terribly, but on top of this, ownership is now stuck paying an injured Deshaun Watson for the next year a fully guaranteed contract to rehabilitate an Achilles injury. All this is happening, mind you, while Baker Mayfield has the Tampa Bay Buccaneers tied for first place in the NFC South, and as of week 6 in the NFL season, has the most touchdown passes in the NFL. There are truthfully no words to describe the quarterback hell that Cleveland has been in since their reintroduction to the NFL in 1999. 38 different men since 1999 have started a game at quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. To put that into perspective, the Green Bay Packers have had just 34 starting quarterbacks in the history of their entire franchise. Before 2018, it was okay to feel bad for the Browns because they had just been incredibly unlucky when it has come to drafting and management. But after 2021, getting rid of Baker Mayfield just 1 season after winning a playoff game because he had a mediocre season with a major injury, it's hard to feel bad for them now. There's no telling how much longer the quarterback carousel will turn in Cleveland, but for now it's turning, and it might begin turning faster than it's ever gone before. And while in years past we'd feel bad for them as NFL fans, now we feel like it's deserved. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. We have an in-depth look at what's going on with Deshaun Watson. I'll leave that in the end screen if you guys want to check it out. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.